people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this, our continued coverage of all this past weekend's action. In the women's super flyweight division, Jasmine Artiga took on Regina Chavez for the newly vacated WBA title, left vacant by then champion Clara Lescurat, who has since retired. And the prediction stuck. Jasmine got the decision. She got the title, which is what I said would happen, but it doesn't seem that she earned it.
I was shocked at what I saw. Regina Chavez was beating the hell out of Jasmine Artiga, winning the exchanges,
landing cleanly, and seemingly was the physically stronger fighter of the two, in spite of Jasmine's noticeable musculature. Regina packed a bigger punch from what I saw. Regina had a lot more mustard on that hot dog. Arguably the more experienced fighter of the two with more career blemishes, but there's a lot of experience in those career blemishes that Regina had already been in there with better fighters than Jasmina had been in there with, so that makes her a more well-rounded fighter.
in spite of the losses.
It was one of the more brazen robberies I've seen in recent memory, because even though I picked Jasmine Artiga to win the title, it looked to me like it should have went to Regina.
It didn't.
By my count, that's the second time that Regina will have been screwed over in a WBA title fight. The first time was with Argentina's own Clara Lescurat when she challenged her for it. They screwed her over, and she got screwed again last night.
Shocking.
So not only did Jasmine get fast-tracked to a world title opportunity that should have went to someone else, someone ranked more highly in the WBA's rank standings, but she was given a decision she didn't earn.
You already know where I'm at. So tonight, everybody know my son fight tonight for the WBA world title. I hope Shorty win, and I'm really hoping that she call me out after this so I could whoop her ass in her hometown for the belt. So tune in to Pro Box tonight.
That was number 2 ranked Liana Cruz of Allentown, Pennsylvania, who's had an axe to grind with Jasmine Artiga for some time now, it being that the title shot should have went to Liana because Liana's ranked at number 2 and Regina's ranked at number 1. Yet for some reason, Jasmine got the shot.
Jasmine, who's ranked at number 7, or she was before yesterday's fight.
And that's the nature of the rift between Liana and Jasmine. That video is from before the fight. See what the outcome is after it. So that Jasmine Artiga, the newly crowned WBA champion, now has Liana Cruz to answer to. With Regina having lost the fight and being ranked at number 1, it's conceivable that she will lose ground, elevating Liana to the number 1 spot,
making her Jasmine's problem.
A few passing thoughts.
What?
Given the controversial nature of the outcome, the decision, it is possible that Regina's people might petition the WBA to review the fight, score it themselves, and see if they don't order a rematch.
That's happened before. That happened years ago in the Ryota Murata versus Hassan Endam fight that was scored to Endam by the judges, but scored to Murata by everybody else. In that situation, the WBA reviewed the fight, ordered a rematch, and a rematch happened. So maybe that could happen here.
Maybe. If it doesn't, Liana Cruz then becomes Jasmine Artiga's problem because Jasmine is the champion and Liana would be the highest ranked contender in the rank standings. Even if she got away with that daylight robbery yesterday, she's not out of the woods. The problems actually start now.
If you've got a belt, the other belt holders, the other champions at the weight, they're going to want a piece of you as well as the contenders in those rank standings, Liana Cruz being one among them.
So we'll see what shakes out in the coming weeks and months. Perhaps a Regina Chavez rematch or a mandated title fight between Jasmine and Liana Cruz. One way or another, something's gotta give.
Here.
As Fundora versus Zayas becomes more and more of a conversation, you're noticing that the fight fans are already taking sides. EST93 said Fundora spanks that little PR puñeta.
He doesn't like Puerto Ricans?
What fuels the Mexico versus Puerto Rico rivalry in the sport of boxing are the fans themselves, the ones in particular that maybe don't like Puerto Ricans.
I never see as many Puerto Ricans trashing Mexicans as I see Mexicans trashing Puerto Ricans.
And what is this long-standing rivalry in the sport of boxing that has many chapters and...
What, this would be another entry?
Nah, sort of. Sebastian Fundora has a Cuban father, but he's got a Mexican-born mother, and so many of these fans are playing favorites on the premise of proximity, that they have more in common with Sebastian and his Mexican mother than they do with Xander Zayas and his Puerto Rican parents.
Puerto Rican mother and father.
Open the gates, 8642 said Jesus Ramos would slap the John Leguizamo out of Xander.
Oh, would he?
Now, what do Sebastian Fundora and Jesus Ramos have in common? They both have Mexican lineage, so we see what the hierarchy of thought here is.
The hierarchy of thought for Open the Gates.
Truly is no thought process at all. You're just playing favorites based on who you have more in common with, which has very little to do with boxing, actual boxing, but that is how some people's minds work, and they absolutely hate it when you point it out.
You're telling me that the Jesus Ramos that couldn't stop Erickson Lubin is gonna stop Xander?
I ain't got nothing against Jesus Ramos, by the way, but if you don't pack a concussive enough punch to stop Lubin, I don't see how you're gonna stop a fresher, younger Xander Zayas. I don't see it. No, I would go with Xander to outpoint both Jesus Ramos and Sebastian Fundora. And your bias against Puerto Ricans?
Oh, that's between you and God.
Talking about boxing, actual boxing, not who lives closer to your house or who you have more in common with. I don't care.
Who you share recipes with, who shops at the same supermarket as you, I don't give a damn.
And I know that nobody, absolutely no one likes a taste of their own medicine. They love when I do this to other folks with their biases.
And that tribalism, as if their tribalism is any different. It's not.
He said that Jesus Ramos would slap the John Leguizamo out of Xander. Is John Leguizamo Puerto Rican?
I thought he was Colombian.
What he ain't is Puerto Rican, so I don't know what association Open the Gates is trying to make. He clearly has something against Puerto Rocks. I don't know what it is. I don't care, because it ain't got nothing to do with boxing.
Yeah, I think Xander outpoints the both of those guys, Jesus Ramos and Sebastian Fundora, because he's a more dynamic boxer than the both of them. All he's lacking is power, punching power.
The issue here is we may not get the chance to find out since these fighters are on different sides of the street. More particular to this conversation, while Xander Zayas is Sebastian's mandatory challenger, and the order has already come down.
It ain't looking like they're gonna fight.
Gabriela Fundora said that there was no need to do a face-off. Wanted to, do a little face-off just to have a little idea of what he looks like in front of me. He actually didn't seem that tall. Obviously, he is taller than me, but didn't seem as taller.
He's not as tall as you thought. Was that the first time you guys met?
Yes, that was the first time we've seen each other in person. So I thought he was going to be a bit taller than what he actually was in front of me. But his sister, Gabriela Fundora, said that there was no need to do a face-off.
So when it's Xander Zayas, your mandatory challenger, who's already installed, the order has already come down, the deadline has been set, you've got 120 days to fight this guy, cough up the brown belt. When it's him, there's no need for a face-off. But a year ago, with Errol Spence Jr., there was...
I ain't gonna celebrate this kind of behavior.
Telling you, I don't give a shit. I don't give two shits what you have in common with Sebastian Fundora. You, your neighbor, his neighbor. A duck is a duck is a duck, and this is already looking a lot like a duck. Like Isaac Cruz and William Zepeda ducking Shakur Stevenson. Do you expect me to treat those situations differently based on those fighters' nationality, their ethnicity in relation to yours?
They're a bunch of ducks.
Sebastian Fundora is a duck that... unless you fight someone the same as or better than Xander, your mandatory challenger, it's a stone cold duck, is what it is. Unless you fight your other mandatory challenger, Virgil Ortiz. Both of which I think beat Sebastian, by the way. I think Xander outpoints him, and I think Virgil knocks him out.
But I said that already. That's not what brings us here. What brings us here is the potentiality of Sebastian circumventing his mandatory challenger and surrendering his belt to him.
So that if he does, I know you're not expecting me to pull punches just because you and Sebastian share a common ancestry. I don't give a shit.
You're a duck too?
I've been asked on more than one occasion over the years why the channel isn't more popular. Well, this is why. I don't really take sides, I just tell you who I think is going to win the fight. And I point out the biases.
I don't pander to nobody.
That doesn't mean that I don't have my own personal favorites. Oh, I do, but that has very little to do with you. I'm not pandering to you or your bullshit.
Sebastian is a duck.
If you don't fight Xander Zayas, and you don't fight somebody higher ranked, somebody better than Xander, you're a duck. The rules don't change for him. They don't change for nobody. The rules stay the same for all the aforementioned fighters. You don't fight this guy or somebody better, that's a stone cold duck. That's all it is.
The same as William Zepeda fighting Tevin Farmer 2 times before he fights Shakur Stevenson once.
The same as Isaac Cruz's team saying that Shakur is a runner just to fight a lesser ranked runner in Giovanni Cabrera. Chicken shits and duckers come in all forms. Every race, creed, and denomination. Do you think you're different? Do you think you're immune?
Not around here.
He's gonna duck him. You can already see where this is going. No time for a mock-up face-off with what is your mandatory challenger, but you had plenty of time to do a face-off with Errol Spence Jr. while he was coming off a demoralizing, lopsided knockout loss. You had time for that, but no time for this. Because you're a ducker.
You chased around a welterweight coming off a loss who's done nothing at junior middle for all of a year. You had time for that, but none for this. And it ain't because you can beat him.
It's because you know what happens if you fight. Your team does.
Even if these guys don't. You lose, my friend, and you know it!
Upstairs in super middleweight news, Fight Hook says super middleweight clash between Diego Pacheco and Christian Mbilli is still stuck in negotiations. Eddie Hearn could be making a play for Pacheco to face Trevor McCumbee instead of Christian Mbilli. And I think that was the original plan for Diego, to put him in the ring with Trevor.
But the Mbilli opportunity came up, and it would seem that they explored it, but they're stuck at an impasse. Because Team Mbilli wanted in Quebec, and Team Pacheco wanted in California. When the fight falls apart, I wouldn't accuse either fighter of ducking because they're both after the same thing. They both want home field advantage.
It would seem that Team Pacheco have spent enough time on it, and maybe they're ready to move on, but that's because they already had a plan in place. Whereas for Christian Mbilli, this was an alteration. Initially, Christian was supposed to be fighting Kevin Lele Sajo in France. That fell apart.
That was supposed to be an IBF eliminator, and for one reason or another, it didn't happen. So that when it didn't happen, they moved on to a potential Pacheco fight. And like I said, Matchroom explored it, but they're stuck at a stalemate over where it happens.
And I don't think you could accuse either fighter of avoiding the other because they're both after the same thing. That if you're saying Diego is ducking, I guess so is Christian, since they both want home field advantage.
If they were to fight, I'd go with Diego to win. Diego's a boxer puncher, whereas Christian is a pressure fighter.
Standing in front of guys, swinging for the fences, has worked for him so far, but if you try that with Diego, you might fluster him in spots. You might crowd him up until something hard gets in, and as aggressive as Christian is, eventually something would. Quality of competition is respectable on both sides. Christian's been in there with a hard-punching Carlos Gangara, an experienced Sergey Derevianchenko.
Diego's been in there with Marcellus Coceres,
Maciej Suliecki, and more recently, unbeaten Steven Nelson in what was a great fight. I do like Diego's quality of competition a little better than Mbilli's, but they're about the same.
It's too bad they're not fighting.
And he may end up opposite the ring Trevor McCumbee, who not that long ago was giving former champion Caleb Plant all he could handle. He even knocked him down. Where David Benavidez couldn't drop this guy, Trevor McCumbee did. So I don't mind the idea that Diego might go up against the same guy. McCumbee's a scrappy guy, awkward, he can punch, there's some power there, What he lacks in form, he makes up for in awkwardness and scrappiness.
Power.
And he's gonna give it a go, he's gonna give it a shot. He's that kind of fighter to where he's gonna take chances. And I like the idea of him versus Pacheco because, well, if he was good enough for Caleb Plant, why wouldn't he be good enough for Diego?
And Christian?
Before we got here, there was actually a plan in place to put Christian Mbilli in the ring with Jaime Munguia. That was last year, but he ends up losing to Bruno Sarace in what was the upset of the year, moves on to the Kevin Lele Sajo fight that falls apart. Now this...
I don't know what Christian's gonna do.
But I really don't blame one team for this fight's collapse more than the other when they're after the same thing. They both want home field advantage, so how could that make one fighter the bad guy and one fighter the good guy? How?
Any ideas for Christian?
He could probably fight Eric Bazinian, who was in there with Jaime Munguia not that long ago. The whole who did it better thing. Maybe he could fight Eric Bazinian. Maybe he could fight Steven Nelson. Steven that was just in there with Diego Pacheco. Same deal. Who did it better? Let's compare how you do with this guy to how Diego did with this guy.
It's a kind of high-risk, low-reward opponents.
Vladimir Shishkin, perhaps, or Bektamir Melenkuziev. It's slim pickings for Christian. I'm not saying it isn't, but after 1 or 2 fights fall apart, really 3, that's how it is.
Elsewhere in the super middleweight division, Steven Nelson called out Edgar Berlanga for a fight, saying, "Bruh, you still owe me some smoke, and I figure if you have Munguia on there coming off a stoppage loss, well..."
Edgar Berlanga replied by saying, "Steven, yo bro, I've got my brother ready to stop you. Tiger official, stop fronting on that smoke."
Tiger added, "Anytime."
To which Steven Nelson responded, "Edgar, do you know how lame you sound right now? You have to call another man to handle your beef? I don't know this guy. I want to settle the beef we've been having since we were both signed to Top Rank. Nothing more, nothing less. How about this? After I stop you, then your brother can try to step in and defend you, and get smashed too."
Another fight I don't expect to happen.
Edgar Berlanga just entered free agency for the 2nd time. And rumor has it he's going to be going to MVP, Most Valuable Promotions. With that, I don't expect a fighter, a high-risk, low-reward fighter like Steven Nelson, to be on his radar. He wasn't on his radar before when they were both at Top Rank, and I don't think he's on his radar now that he's a free agent.
There is a discrepancy in the fighters' ages. Steven Nelson is several years older than Edgar, so the sooner he gets him in the ring, the better.
I've always favored Steven Nelson to win that fight, all the way back there when they were both at Top Rank, and it was a bit of a conversation. It still is a bit of a conversation now, but Edgar's not stupid, and neither is Keith Connolly. They're not going to roll the dice on a fighter like Steven.
I've heard Edgar mention a potential Munguia fight, a potential Plant fight, even a Jermall Charlo fight, but he's never been receptive to this one.
The super middleweight division is a deep division with many good fighters in it and many good fights to make, but Edgar hasn't made it this far by taking on all comers, by gambling, by rolling the dice.
He thinks he's a superstar already, for God's sake.
Bottom line, irrespective of what you see on the internet and how many back and forth exchanges there are, I don't think this fight sees the light of day.